I begged for the worst doctor. You won't believe what happened. The silence in the farmhouse was a living thing, heavier now than it had been the day after Daniel died. Back then it was just grief, a raw, gaping wound. Now it was something else, something that pressed in on me, suffocating. The doctors called it depression, then chronic fatigue, then fibromyalgia when those didn't fit. They threw diagnoses at me like darts, hoping one would stick. None did. It started subtly. A persistent ache in my bones, like I'd been run over by a truck. Then came the fatigue, a bone-deep weariness that no amount of sleep could touch. My vision blurred, sounds warped, and my thoughts tangled like knotted yarn. I went from hiking 5 miles a day to struggling to walk from the bedroom to the kitchen. Dr. Lee, bless his heart, ran every test imaginable. Blood work, MRI, neurological exams. All came back normal. It's probably stress, Anna, he'd said, his voice laced with that familiar blend of pity and helplessness. Grief can manifest in strange ways. Grief, I knew this wasn't grief. Grief was a raw, burning ache. This was something else, something colder, deeper, more insidious. Martha, my sister, had moved in after Daniel's accident. A registered nurse, she was my lifeline, my advocate, my jailer. She cooked, cleaned, drove me to appointments, and tried to force-feed me platitudes along with organic chicken soup. I loved her for it, but sometimes I wanted to scream. One night, hunched over my laptop, I stumbled upon it. A name whispered in the dark corners of the internet doctor, Elias Thorne. A disgraced physician, ostracized by the medical community for his unorthodox methods. Rumors swirled around him, whispered tales of miraculous cures, shadowed by darker whispers of unethical experiments and patients who vanished without a trace. Don't even think about it, Martha said, her voice sharp when I dared to mention Thorne. We were in the kitchen, Martha meticulously arranging pills into a weekly organizer. The fluorescent lights glinted off the steel of her disapproval. He's a quack, Anna, a dangerous one. People disappear who go to him. I'm disappearing anyway, Martha, I croaked, my voice raspy from disuse. At least this way I might have a chance. The drive to Thorne's clinic was an exercise in escalating dread. The road narrowed, the asphalt cracked and overgrown with weeds. The trees clawed at the sky, their bare branches like skeletal fingers. The air grew thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something acrid and vaguely metallic. The clinic itself was a dilapidated Victorian house, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin. The windows were dark and empty like hollow eye sockets. A single flickering porch light cast long, distorted shadows. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of antiseptic, and something else, something older, mustier, like decaying leaves and forgotten things. The waiting room was sparsely furnished with threadbare chairs and a stained rug. 2 other patients sat in silence, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes unfocused. One was an elderly woman with a hacking cough. The other was a young man, his body unnaturally still. Thorne emerged from a back room. He was a tall, gaunt man with hollow cheeks and eyes that seemed to absorb all the light in the room. His white coat was stained and rumpled, his hands long and bony. He exuded an aura of weary detachment, as if he were simply going through the motions of a life he no longer cared for. Anna, he said, his voice a dry rasp, I've been expecting you. His examination was peculiar. He used outdated instruments, tapped my joints with an unsettling force, and asked questions that seemed to have nothing to do with my symptoms. He peered into my eyes with a magnifying glass, his breath hot on my face. Interesting, he murmured, more to himself than to me, very interesting. He explained his treatment plan in cryptic terms. He spoke of realigning energies, cleansing toxins, and restoring balance. He made me sign a consent form that was dozens of pages long, filled with dense legal jargon. I barely glanced at it. I was too desperate to care. The treatments began the following week. They were unpleasant. Injections of viscous fluids that burned like fire. Electric shocks that made my muscles spasm uncontrollably. Herbal concoctions that tasted like dirt and despair. At first, I felt marginally better. The fatigue eased slightly, the pain dulled. Hope flickered within me, a fragile flame in the darkness. But then things started to change. The treatments became more intense, more invasive. Thorne started experimenting, tweaking the formulas, adjusting the dosages. My dreams became vivid and disturbing, filled with shadowy figures and whispering voices. I heard noises in the farmhouse at night, scratching at the windows, footsteps on the stairs. The other patients, they weren't getting better. The elderly woman's cough worsened, rattling her frail frame. The young man became even more withdrawn, his eyes vacant and unseeing. He shuffled around the waiting room like a zombie, his skin gray and translucent. Detective Washington visited the farmhouse. He was investigating a series of disappearances in the area. Young people mostly, gone without a trace. We've had reports, he said, his eyes narrowed, of people going to Dr. Thorne. And then, they just vanish. He asked about Thorne's methods, about the other patients. I found myself defending Thorne, minimizing the strangeness, downplaying my fears. I didn't understand why. One day, while Thorne was out of the room, I ventured into a part of the clinic I hadn't seen before. A door at the end of a dimly lit hallway, usually locked, stood ajar. I pushed it open. The room was small and windowless, illuminated by a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. It was filled with medical equipment, surgical instruments, gleaming and sharp, arranged on a steel table. Jars filled with cloudy liquid sat on shelves, their contents unidentifiable. And then I saw the photographs, stacked in a haphazard pile on a corner of the table. Photographs of people, Thorne's patients, before and after photographs. The before pictures showed them as they were when they first arrived at the clinic, sick, weary, desperate. The after pictures, they were horrifying. Their faces were blank, their eyes empty. Their bodies seemed hollowed out. Beneath the photographs, I found a stack of documents. Patient files, medical charts, and something else, something that made my blood run cold. Transcripts, detailed accounts of Thorne's experiments, notes on his patients' reactions, records of extractions. He wasn't just treating them, he was taking something from them, something vital. I fled the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I found Thorne in the waiting room talking to the young man. He turned as I entered, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "Anna," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I was wondering when you'd find your way here." I confronted him. I told him what I'd seen, what I'd read. He didn't deny anything. "I am not merely treating illness, Anna," he said, his voice low and hypnotic. "I am perfecting, removing the impurities, cleansing the soul. What are you doing to them?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "I am giving them peace," he said. "A release from the burdens of existence." He explained his greater purpose, his vision of a world free from suffering, a world populated by beings devoid of pain and emotion. He believed he was doing God's work. "You are next, Anna," he said, his eyes fixed on mine. "You are almost ready." I tried to run, but he was too fast. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. He dragged me to a back room, a room I hadn't seen before. It was sterile and cold, filled with strange machines and glowing screens. He strapped me to a table. He inserted needles into my veins. He attached electrodes to my temples. "This will hurt," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, "but it will be worth it." The pain was excruciating, a searing, burning agony that ripped through my body, tearing at my mind. I saw visions, fleeting images of Daniel, of my childhood home, of faces I didn't recognize. I heard voices whispering, chanting, screaming. I felt myself dissolving, fragmenting, losing myself in a sea of pain and madness. I felt something being pulled from me, something essential, something that defined who I was, and then darkness. I awoke in my own bed. The farmhouse was silent, peaceful. The sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm, golden glow. I felt different, lighter, cleaner. The pain was gone. The fatigue was gone. I felt empty. Martha rushed in, her face etched with worry. "Anna, you're awake. How do you feel?" "Better," I said, my voice flat. "I feel better." Martha studied me, her eyes narrowed. "You look different," she said. "What did he do to you?" "He cured me," I said. "He made me whole, but I wasn't whole. I was something else, something less. I returned to my life. I cooked, I cleaned, I tended the garden. I went through the motions, but I felt no joy, no sadness, no anything." Detective Washington came back. He asked more questions about Thorne, about the other patients. I answered him truthfully, but my voice was devoid of emotion. My words sounded scripted. He left, his face troubled. I knew he suspected something, but he couldn't prove it. One afternoon, while tending my garden, I saw a car pull up to Thorne's clinic. A young woman got out, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with desperation. I watched her walk towards the clinic, her shoulders slumped, her hope fragile, and I smiled. It was a small, almost imperceptible smile, but it was there. A knowing smile, an unsettling smile, a smile that said, "Welcome, you're in good hands."